Good afternoon and welcome. I am happy that you're joining me this afternoon, and we're talking about Cornerstone number 4 today, um, the mind, body, and spirit. And remember, the cornerstones are the four cornerstones basically that give us a sound foundation from which we can step off in any direction in our recovery, and all so important. And today's topic is something that I'm particularly passionate about because I've seen it as relevant and so important for so long. And essentially we live in a culture that kind of poo-poos the whole mind-body connection, when in fact we are but a brief glimpse in the history of medicine, and I'm talking thousands of years of medicine, where the mind and the body have in fact been separated from one another. So to live in a time where medicine is seeing that shift, where they're actually putting the mind and the body back together again, is wonderful. So we're talking about the mind-body, and I'm talking mind-body, so one entity, and spirit or soul or chi or prana or whatever you want to call it. So the mind body is how these two interconnect, and the spirit is that which illuminates the body. Okay, so like I said, some people call it spirit, you might call it soul, you may call it prana, chi, wherever it is you come from. But it's interesting, in 15 years of private practice, it's so relevant to me because so many people come to me and expect me to just fix them. And fixing stuff is just so much more than that, right? And it's actually that attitude, or that it's not even an attitude, it's just an essence, something that we've been raised with, that is actually the problem, because we've become so disconnected from ourselves that the mind, well, we've been told, right, our medical community, or what the dogma of our time is, that the mind is a function of the brain, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the body. But we're going to talk today about how that is different. And what if I were to tell you that true healing starts with you and everything about you, and that you already possess some of the most powerful tools required for healing, but they've probably been muted in you as they've been muted in me and your friends and neighbors since childhood. So one thing that I want you to think about, and I think the most important thing when we start to shift into the realization that the mind body is super important, is that healing doesn't happen at the level of the symptom. Okay, the symptom is just the tip of that iceberg. And if you can think of, what do we know about icebergs? Most of it is underwater, right? So just like healing, the symptom is the tip of it, but the rest of it lies underwater. And beyond the symptom, right underneath the surface of that water, there's a physiological change. And beyond that physiological change, there is a psychological change. And beyond that psychological change, there's an energetic change. Because, in essence, that's all we are, is different manifestations of energy. And once again, that's coming out of our quantum physics science. So if you're groaning and rolling your eyes right now, I encourage you to bear with me and stay tuned, because you're probably somebody who really needs to hear this message more than anybody else, because I find that it doesn't take much, to scratch off the surface for people to pop with what they feel and what they think and about exactly what we're talking about. And remember, our status quo, so what we live in, what happens around us all every day, is very survival oriented, right? And stress, from a stress perspective, and that's all stress is. Stress is a response to a threat that keeps us alive. So the body prioritizes that message, right? Because it wants to keep us safe. This culture that we live in rewards us and measures us by what we do. So there's no value in the non-doing. We work in that, we exist in that work hard, play hard kind of environment. So we've got this busy, 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 busy thing. So when we start talking about feelings versus thinking, then things start to get uncomfortable for a lot of people, right? But that driven culture I was talking to leads to all kinds of stuff, right? It makes us strive for perfectionism, which I've got to tell you folks, those of you who are self-proclaimed perfectionist, doesn't exist. We start dealing in terms of should. Oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, rather than being present with, what's going on right now. It's exactly this culture that leads us to the desire for a quick fix. And that doesn't exist either. So what happens? People get so stressed and so rattled, nobody's having any fun, and they're just getting sicker and sicker. So, you start talking about the mind-body connection, people start throwing around words like woo-woo. Actually, I remember a wonderful patient of mine who has really gone on to be quite an ambassador for the healing ability or the capacity of healing that the body can do. The first time he came to see me, he sat in my office right here and said, I don't know really why I'm here, because I kind of think what you do is very woo-woo. But really, what's happening now is we're bridging the science and the spiritual. And this is happening all around us right now. In the data, in the science, just not yet in the doctor's office. Hopefully it'll get there in our lives. I know there are some doctors that do counseling. I know there are some that dare to talk about that with their patients. But the science is absolute. Sorry, I'm squirming in this seat because I'm a little bit uncomfortable in it. So the science is absolutely in. The body produces a physiological response to our thoughts and our emotions. And this is way beyond the power of positive thinking. These are deep-seated thoughts, patterns, and behaviors that have really been with us. They're what we've been raised with, right? They're what our parents passed on to us, and doing the best that they possibly could at the time. For some people, that worked out really well. For other people, not so great. God bless my parents. My dad was a post-war immigrant person. So his experience of the world was completely different than mine, being born and raised in Canada and, being sort of the culture from the first day I was born. But, we have all of these thoughts, patterns, and behaviors. We have experiences, maybe stuff that is still kind of eating away, stuff that we quote unquote haven't gotten over yet. And these things just are constant stress and constantly bombarding the central nervous system. So dysfunctional thoughts, patterns, and behaviors change our reality, and they really change how we see things. And they even change our sense of self. And through that process, we'll also experience how we will also change how we experience health and disease. So, you probably know other people with MS who have a very different experience of it than you do. Sure, there are different processes going on just because of the complexity of the disease, but there's also the thoughts, patterns, and behaviors with which we embrace it, right? But suffice it to say that there is a direct and very scientific connection between the mind and the body, and in fact it's referred to as the mind-body connection. There are a couple of researchers that I want to bring to your attention here who have written lovely books and do a lot of other stuff. And for high caliber researchers, this is kind of unusual, but they do meditations and different music adaptations and things. that allow the body to heal. One of them is Dr. Candace Pert, and she was a great lady. She died prematurely, really a wonderful woman. Dr. Pert, at a very young age, discovered the morphine receptor in the brain in the 60s. So, like, this is incredibly significant research as a young woman in the 60s. And interestingly enough, her research went on to show us that every thought we think, every emotion we emote, is received by receptors on the cells. So our cells actually have receptors. And just like anything now, we know that when we load those receptors, we can switch things in one direction or another. So we can switch genes on and off. We can switch physiological processes on and off. So very, very significant research. Dr. Bruce Lipton, Candace Pert's first book was called Molecules of Emotion, but I would just Google her. And Dr. Bruce Lipton, who has become quite famous for his work as well, was also one of those researchers whose work blew his own mind. And one of his experiments that sort of sticks in my mind is he took a tissue sample from a host, say you or me, took a piece of tissue from us, put it in a petri dish so it wouldn't die, drove it 14 miles away, and then did something stressful to the host. And what was interesting was the physiological stressful reaction that was measured in the host was also measured in that tissue 14 miles away. So there's a lot, I think, going on that we just don't know about yet. But what we do know is that there is a deep and abiding need for us to be connected to our bodies. Hippocrates, who you know is considered the father of modern medicine from very long ago, I think he was born in 640 AD, said that natural forces from within us are the true healers of disease. So I just want you to chew on that for a few minutes, right? Beyond that, quantum physics has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that what we think, what we feel, and what we believe has profound determination on our reality. Makes sense, right? If we believe our cup is half full, then that's the kind of world and that's the kind of experience of the world we have. If we think MS sucks, then surely it will. Because we are creating that experience through our words and through our thoughts. And our tissue, according to Dr. Pert's work, our tissue has receptors for that and is making sure that that is so in our body, right? So those limiting thoughts, once again, play a huge role. So working harder, doing more, thinking what we should be doing, pushing, is not serving us. Our body is a tremendous resource that we don't use. And I mentioned earlier that we are actually trained away from it. So, it's the concept of intuition. And you've probably had a gut feeling or just sort of felt something. And then afterwards you said, I should have listened to my gut. I should have listened to it. Some people get goosebumps. Some people get shivers. That's all called intuition. And that is just your body talking to yourself. And the other side of that, of course, the flip side of that is getting stuck in a physical fear. Because when we're young, we just want to fit in, right? And of course, our parents just want you to fit in, so we don't encourage that kind of stuff. I've got a feeling, I had a dream, I have a sense, I feel something. So it's kind of learned out of us very quickly. But really what we need to do is get back to listening to our body on that soul level. And I want you to think of the body as a bridge between the mind and the soul or the spirit or whatever you want to call it. So who's winning that tug of war? Is it that thinking mind that's too busy to stop, or is it that soul or that spirit that's saying, hey, can we just sit down and chill for a little while because I've got some healing to do? We very seldom get to that level, so don't feel discouraged if you're not there, because it's not our norm, right? And the consciousness of people has changed, right? So our sort of especially in North America, the association of a power greater than us is sort of comes to God. And then the association of God is always with religion. And that's a showstopper for a lot of people. They're like, no, not going down that religious road. And I don't blame you. But what I'm telling you is that connection with spirit, that connection with soul, doesn't have to be a religious one. I remember doing some work with Alcoholics Anonymous a number of years. I had a girlfriend that was attending regularly, and I was her support person. And I was fascinated by those meetings because back then, which would have been probably 30 years ago, they openly talked about their connection to God and being, being divinely guided and stuff like that. And now, in the modern AA vernacular, they use the words, the God of your understanding. So I encourage you to embrace the God of your understanding, and let's not get stuck on semantics. So that might be God, it might be the divine, it might be spirit, it might be universal healing, it might be Mother Nature, it might be a higher version of yourself, whatever you'd like to call it. But whatever that essence is, it's what illuminates you. Okay, so it's what it gives us that peace, really, that stillness, right? That opportunity for stillness. And it's everything we've talked about is really is also talking about what kind of people, what kind of person we are. So I think. There's another Hippocrates quote that says it's more important to know what sort of person has a disease than what sort of disease a person has. Because you can go by the book and you can develop a protocol, but that protocol is not going to work for everybody, right? Because everybody's easier. And I can tell you from experience, it's much easier to work with people who have a sense of self-awareness, self-compassion, open-mindedness, or even optimism, than somebody who is in here just looking for that bottle that's going to cure them, So we've done a lot of sort of talking about the way things are, right, and what our culture is and how we're sort of, we're not connected to ourselves. We don't go deep. We don't follow our intuition. We get caught up in this stress. We live in our heads, disconnected from our bodies. And all of that stuff really isn't much of a healing experience, is it? Where does the healing happen in that? I'd like to tell people that every moment we spend in the stress response is a moment we're not healing. And I know I can use a personal example from my own naturopath. I've had a naturopathic physician as primary care since the early 1990s. And often, as you well know, a blip, or I wouldn't call it a relapse because, let's call it a relapse, comes at a time of significant stress. And I'll phone him, like so many people phone me in a panic and say, I'm having problems. And he and I have a great relationship, and he'll say, Teri, I'm not even going to talk to you until you've got your stress response under control. Now, I probably couldn't get away with that with a lot of my patients, but his point is well taken. Every moment we spend in the stress response is a moment that we're not healing. So, when you think of the model we've just described, there's really not a lot of hope for healing in that, is there? Which may sound crazy, it may sound impossible, but it's up to each of us to actually step outside of that to connect with a bit of serious healing stuff, right? Because we all have choices. And as difficult as it may seem, and it might seem impossible sometimes, until we hit a wall, and then choice is the only thing that we have. So, I want you to think about choices and making hard choices to really change your life to the benefit of healing. Because recovering health, of course, is so much more than surviving or managing our pain or managing patterns or managing symptoms, right? That's just old thinking. And that old thinking is getting busted left, right, and center. And I know a lot of these Facebook Lives, everything comes back to neuroplasticity, and I joke about that, but it so does. So I just mentioned pain. So recovering health and sorry, I'm shiny object. I'm going to go down the pain path for a second. So I hope you've all read Norman Doidge's book, The Brain That Heals Itself, because it's a very good one, and especially if you have pain. Now, by the grace of the God of my understanding, I have never suffered from long-term pain, but I have had 2 3-month episodes of it. And in Dr. Doidge's book, he talks about Dr. Merkovitz, who's the big pain guru down in the States. In fact, he's written every pain protocol for every medical school that is out there. And he himself suffered from chronic pain. And, the pain model is a good example of what we need to do, because the pain, so what triggers pain, there's the trigger, there's the experience of pain, and then there's the feedback loop, because it's same old, that triggers another pain impulse, and feedback triggers another pain impulse. So if we use pain as the model for what we're talking about, making choices or stepping outside of what is normal, it's about redirecting that pain experience by not allowing it to get up and trigger another pain signal, but redirecting that somehow. And Dr. Moskowitz experienced himself, along with Dr. Doidge, how consciously redirecting that pain signal actually took him out of that chronic pain that he had been in since he was in his 20s, right? So recovering health, once again, it's about doing things that are going to give us a foothold, are going to give us a leg up. It's about self-compassion. It's about exploring those deeper parts of ourselves. And it's about coming toe-to-toe with those limiting beliefs that are sabotaging our health, and really rewriting the script that is constantly playing in our head. So where do you start? Where do you go with that, right? It all sounds very great, and it all sounds very theoretical. And last week we talked about persistence and patience, and the same applies, because really it is neuroplasticity again, isn't it? Because we're creating new pathways. So I'm not telling you that you're going to sit down next Saturday because you've got an hour between 12 and 1 where you can do a meditation and you're going to pop up and everything's going to be changed. I'm talking about making significant changes that become practices in the everyday world. And what we see is, we see it happening all over the place. There's lots of data out there about, I'll use meditation as an example, because that's a perfect example of not only going within, but also being still and stopping that mind. There's tons of research on meditation and pain, meditation and sleep, meditation and just about everything. But I first got into my mind-body meditation, my mind-body training when I did an intensive program down at the Institute for Mind-Body Healing at the University of Harvard, a little medical school you've probably heard of, who has a very, very real Mind-Body Institute down there. And it was a fascinating time, and there were 600 people in the class, and 300 of them were cardiologists. And I happened to be sitting beside one of those cardiologists, and I was fascinated that there were so many cardiologists there. And I said, why so many cardiologists? And cover your ears if you've got sensitive ears, because I'm going to quote a man, and there's a swear word in here. He looked at me and he said, because this shit works. So what is that he was referring to? This calming the mind. He was applying it specifically to cardiovascular health, but we know that the heart and the brain and the gut are a triad, right? So what was the biggest message I took away from that training, besides my cardiologist friend and his candid comments? There's a slide that I actually still use. I stole it from them, and it's a slide, it's a pie chart of where we spend our mental time. And one part of that pie is the 40% of our time that we spend ruminating about the past. So playing over and over again, mostly failures, right? Regrets. I wish I'd done it differently. If only I coulda, that kind of thing. So stuff that we can't change. It's water under the bridge, it's gone, right? 40% of our mental time we spend there. 50% of our time is spent fretting about the future. What if, what if, what if? Stuff that hasn't even happened yet, which leaves exactly 10% of our time to be right here in the present moment. And, what can you say about the present moment? So much. It is where life happens. It's where we create our experience of life, but it's also where healing happens. So healing doesn't happen in the past, and it doesn't happen in the future. It happens right here, right now. And that 90%, that 40 plus 50, where we spend the vast majority of our time, is all about fear, isn't it? We get cycling in our head, and we're either thinking about the past or dreaming about the future, and we're not present in our body. And guess what? Healing starts when we stop and get present. So, for those of you who I've implored to hang on, that's probably woo-woo enough for you, but it's so real. It's so real. And once again, got it from Harvard. So, when we start looking at steps for recovery, I'd have to say the first one is just to stop. Just stop. Stop doing, stop thinking, stop planning, stop worrying, and just be. As flaky as that sounds. So just close your eyes whenever you get a chance and connect with your body and feel it. You might not want to feel it, but guess what? I think I said it once before. You can't change something you don't understand or you don't feel or you don't own. It's called self-compassion, checking in with your body. So just stop doing stuff and start connecting. Drop into that core of your being and develop a great awareness of that deep space. I like to do this when I go to bed at night. I just breathe really deeply, and with every exhale, I just let go. Just drop another 10 or 20 pounds of worry off, and just feel my body sink into the bed. It's really kind of neat. Slow down your breath, right? Breathe as if it were your last breath. So if you don't know about belly breathing, go to YouTube and find out about it. But nice deep belly breathing. Breathe like it's your very last breath. With that great sigh that you would have when you came home from a long day and just throw yourself into that chair. That okay. When we slow the breath, we automatically slow the mind. And that's what belly breathing is all about, right? When we raise the belly first, we're activating that vagus nerve, which is the communication between the gut and the brain. So we're calming the gut, we're calming the brain, we're checking in with ourselves. I'm going to use an expression that I use trepidatiously because it's not one that I like, but I'm using it in a greater sense, and that is let go of stuff. I mean, the stuff that people hold on to, the stuff that we hold on to, and I even catch myself doing it. I'm not above any of this advice that I'm giving you. It's sort of like, why on earth am I holding on to that? It takes a tremendous amount of energy to be fearful of the past and present. And that's really what's happening when we're holding on to crap, right? It's usually the past. When you look at Bruce Lipton's work, he talks about energy psychology and being able to sort of connect and release stuff or let go of stuff through the use of energy psychology. And we've talked about one of those methods of energy psychology called tapping. And if you look back on the Facebook page on the MS Path with Teri, Jaklin, ND, there's actually a link to the founder's page of energy psychology, and it doesn't cost you anything. That was one of his things. This should be available to everybody. So practicing something like tapping that helps you to move beyond your self-limiting beliefs and step into the moment so you can change them. Another thing that I often recommend, and I find it very helpful, is just stopping once again long enough to be grateful, to practice gratitude. And I do an expedited version of this. Every morning when I open my eyes, I simply say thank you, thank you, thank you. And every night when I go to sleep, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, you could get really specific if you wanted to and say thank you for my wonderful home, thank you for my great job, thank you for my, special friends, thank you for that delicious dinner. But, take a few moments in gratitude. In fact, you could even do a gratitude journal. A lot of people journal their gratitude. At the end of the day, they just reflect and are grateful for whatever they're grateful for. And if you're not one of those people that can't sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and think of something, just think of 3 things. Say, I'm going to be grateful for 3 things. And maybe it was exactly some of the things I said. Thank you for the warm home I live in. Thank you for the delicious food I had for dinner. Thank you for my loving husband. Whatever that is. But what are we doing? We're changing some of those crazy thoughts, patterns, and behaviors that keep us busy in our mind. We're stopping for a moment to be grateful. And, even catching ourselves in some of our self-talk or some of that self-talk, that inside self-talk that becomes outside talk. And, finding a different way to say things. Is there another way that I could say that wasn't so negative, that wasn't conjuring up that feeling of doom and gloom, but rather sparked a spark of hope? Because remember, our tissues have receptors for those thoughts. And Mike and I, who you met in one of my husband, who you met in one of my earlier Facebook lives, we catch ourselves, or we like to help one another catch ourselves in those moments. Is there perhaps another way you could have said that? And there always is. There absolutely always is. And you know what? We've got to get over sometimes a lot of anger and hostility to be able to say it in a different way. But of course, that's part of the process, isn't it? A great way to start connecting the mind body is a guided meditation. And specifically, I'm a big fan of the body scan meditation, because that really, brings it home. We're checking in with every part of our body and loving every part of our body, even if it's not doing what we would prefer that it would do. So moving out of that lesser than model to one of gratitude, or if you don't want to be grateful for it, then just be mindful of it, just be aware of it. So, ultimately at the end of the day, of course, working with a therapist or a counselor or a group that helps you move forward, not one of those sit around and complain about everything groups. That's something I'm a big advocate for, because, we're moving out of the world that says if you see a therapist, then it's broken, right? That mind is broken. Well, if that mind is broken, it's directly connected to the body. So think about that. But what I really encourage you to do with this fourth cornerstone, this mind-body cornerstone, is just start. Even just scratch the surface and see what's underneath, right? So stop. Just stop and really dive into yourself. Embrace that woo-woo and really let it help yourself heal. Okay? So, thank you for joining me, and I look forward to hearing from you, and I will always be very quickly answering your questions on the Facebook page. If you haven't already, please go to, well, you're obviously there if you're watching me, Teri Jaklin, the MS Path with TeriJaklin.com, and give us a like, and you'll automatically get notices of these things. And next week, we're going to talk about relevance. How are things relevant to you? I haven't come up with a snazzy name for it yet, but I will. So we're going to talk about taking all that stuff, all the information, all the opinions, all the experiences that are out there, and instead of turning it into something that's completely overwhelming and frustrating, learning how to make it into something that's relevant for you. Okay, so thank you for coming. Have a great weekend, Canada Day weekend for those Canadians here, and even if you're not in Canada, you can celebrate the greatness of Canada yourself. Take good care. We have a question.
From beautiful downtown Kelvington, Saskatchewan.
Hey, Kelvington, Saskatchewan.
Absolutely.
Tammy, and that's Frank. Tammy, right?
Do you see the question on your screen? What is the best book that can teach you to meditate?
Okay. Wow, great question, Tammy. So,
I'm going to suggest CDs.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't, so I'll give you a couple names. Jack Kornfield is one of my absolute favorites, and he's got a million books. So just go to a website called SoundsTrue.com. SoundsTrue.com is an online bookstore that specializes in everything we've been talking today about mind, body, about meditation, about healing, that kind of from a spiritual perspective. And, you can get the digital downloads for a fraction of the price of the books. But Jack Kornfield is a good one. John Kabat-Zinn, Kabat-Zinn.
I like Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh is a great one.
Yeah.
He's a Buddhist monk. I've got a bunch of his lectures, and I just love listening to him.
He's very funny, but I'm not sure he knows it.
Yes, he's very funny. There's also a website, it's from Australia, a lovely lady, it's called fragrantheart.com, and she has dozens of free meditations that you can stream for free, including a 7-day, I believe, Learn How to Meditate course. So that might be interesting for you. There's also a number of apps out there. The one that I use, the one that I have on my cell phone is called calm.com. So CALM.com. And they also have a 5-day Learn How to Meditate for free as part of the free app, and then they have a body scan meditation and I think a relaxation meditation. And then there's also one called Headspace. There's a bunch of them. But just start digging around, Tammy. You know, I think YouTube is a great place to start looking for stuff like that. And you can start to get a sense of what you like and who you like. And, you know, I would just go to YouTube and search meditation or mindfulness, and you'll probably come up with a lot of great things.
And we want to hear your results when you're
Yeah,
done.
let me know. Let me know what you find. Let me know what your favorite was. Okay?
What other subjects do people want to hear?
Yes. Please let me know other things that you want to hear about. I know I had a request from Mr. Dick about LDN, and I will probably do a Facebook post about that at some point. But you know, the MS path is about the journey of healing, about the process of healing. So please share your questions and concerns with me. I'm happy to talk about your individual concerns too. Okay? Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Take good care.